Here we go. All right, and welcome to the Best in Slot podcast, a Warcraft podcast by the community for the community. I'm your main host, Sparty, and this is my co-host, Midgettes, as well here. This is episode 6. Today we talk about Antorus. Well, hello, Midgettes. How's it going? How's your morning?
Morning's been great. Really enjoyed the first week of Antorus. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it.
Oh, man. I loved it. I loved it. I think that's the universal consensus here. Everybody has loved Antorus so far. Yeah.
I thought it was a lot of fun. I liked the encounters. They seemed to scale a little easy maybe, but I know we had somebody who had just come back and got Amanthal's vision, so I know everybody is loving the RNG of the drops on those.
Yeah, that's something for sure we'll talk about. Yeah, so it's been a good week so far, but let's get into our first little segment here, which is what's new in the community. So what's new? So we're start talking about the Amethyl trinkets, right?
Exactly.
So we did have a player in Zeros to Heroes come back after a long hiatus, right? They ran Antorus, I think, normal or heroic, and of course he was the first person to be able to get Amethyl's vision.
That's correct. And he also got one of the other trinkets, too. So I'm pretty sure he switched mains at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
And made lots of friends.
Yes, a person that, hasn't played for a while, comes back to the game, gets his first Argus kill, and of course gets both trinkets. Yeah, that's the epitome of RNG and what we love to see in these kind of games. But yeah, for those who don't know, the trinkets themselves, right? The Antorus Compassion, the class or the spec specific trinkets, they're all personal loot push, which means they automatically get put into your inventory if you have the bag space, obviously. And with those, you can't really coin them, right? You can't really. It doesn't matter which difficulty you set on, any of that stuff. All that matters is, that you're there present and you're there for the first kill. It also doesn't matter which difficulty you run. So whether you're LFR, normal, heroic, mythic, you still have the base chance, and then that the same kind of trinket will drop for you regardless. So if you've had luck, great. I think we had one trinket or two trinkets drop in our 30-man raid. Some of the other Zeros to Heroes teams, I think, had like 6 out of 14, which is absolutely insane. We just have crappy luck with really any trinkets.
Well, I know my goal is to get mine before you do.
Well, that should be everybody's goal, but knowing my luck, that's going to happen anyway.
But I'm going to link it. I'm going to put it on Twitter. I'm going to let everybody know that I got it before you did.
Of course, because you're mean like that. That's.
I know I am.
I think the other thing with the upgrade trinkets, though, so next week we should anticipate those upgrade items dropping, whether I think you have a trinket or not. Otherwise, I think the catch mechanic would be just way too much, right? So let's say, it's typical Sparty luck and I get the trinket 2 months later. If my little upgrade components don't start dropping till after I get the trinket, I'm going to be so far behind, right? Like really months behind compared to everybody else. So I think universally we should be getting those 5-item level upgrade components at the same time, right? Right after our first Argus kill or, whenever. But then everybody can upgrade up to that same point, right? So if I get it, next week, if you get it next week and I get it 2 months later, we can upgrade it up to the same level at that point, right? So that's the hope.
That's the hope, and we'll have to see how that works out. But the goal is for everybody's alts and all of us casuals to beat all you raiders to those trinkets.
Yeah, well, it's very all going to happen, and many raiders will be upset. But that is the nature of these MMOs, right? We have that RNG component that's always been there, right? Whether it's been Diablo style or any kind of Warcraft games or any other RPGs, there is that random component where sometimes loot drops, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you get really lucky. That's all.
And you get gold. I don't even think you get AP anymore, right?
I went to help one of the other teams with a heroic run last night. I'm like, hey, I'm going to coin because I really need this. It has 3 out of 4 potential loot upgrades for me. Of course, I rolled artifact power.
But of course, the good news, though, is you were not squished by the elevator. Tally was. That was hysterical.
That was actually really hilarious because we were going into I think it was Portal Keeper Hazabel, one of those bosses, and right before the elevator. And of course, normally the elevator comes down on top of you, you jump on top, and you go back up, right? This was a really clever twist. I'm hoping that it was intentional by the devs, where if you are under the elevator when it comes, it squishes you and you die. And of course, I was busy like dealing with loot or something, so I wasn't up with the rest of the group. But as it came down, everybody just was massacred. And it was absolutely hilarious. It came out of nowhere, right? It squished everybody, and people had no idea, why did we die? Oh, the elevator. It's the elevator boss again, but in a different format. So it was fun to
We
see.
have to have great elevator bosses, and I think it was the ultimate Blizzard troll.
Oh, for sure, right? I mean, we've had the elevator boss, since Serpent Shrine and all those other raid tiers, but this was a really fun twist on it, that it actually crushes you, as it should, when it comes down.
Well, Tally's reaction was awesome, and so was the team. I believe it was Bran who said Death Jester 0, Elevator 1. We'll see how it goes for the rest of the tier.
Yep, yeah. What else is new? You have the Dark Moon Fair?
Well, the Dark Moon Fair came out. I know I'm still working on the mount.
Right.
I imagine you haven't gotten your 1,000 Dark Moon prize tickets yet.
No, of course not, but it's something I want to look forward to. One of our guildies, Sevirus, has the mount, and every time he rides around as a blimp, I'm so jealous of him. I want that blimp. It's awesome.
It is an awesome mount, and so I don't think I'm going to get it this month, probably next month, but it's something I'm working on. Of course, it has the rep buff. For those few people who don't have the rep-based benefits to raid, it's a good way to finish getting them. We were joking in raid last night because there's a couple of people who don't have the rep-based, what is it called? I can't remember. The
rune, the augment rune, right?
Yeah, the augment rune. And it's like, come on, guys, let's go get that. So you can help your buddies by making sure they have all of their trinkets and buffs for raid, if for no other reason.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that kind of thing, it saves you so much gold. It's you can use it for world quests. It's a little buff, right? I mean, it's very minuscule, but every little bit does help, right? And when you're off doing world quests or doing whatever else, take the time, go to Dark Moon Fair, pick up the 10% rep bonus for an hour, and go do some world quests, right? It's going to help you down the line, and it's going to save you a day of world questing and get that trinket even sooner, right? Or your mounts if you're going that way as well.
Well, not only that, I was going to mention you have all of the mounts from the different rep bonuses in Legion, and I know I've been working on them, but I'm still trying to figure out what to do with my extra eggs because I have all of my eggs now.
Well, I need to start collecting eggs and get those mounts. I'm running my Warlock a little bit more to get some of the mounts and world quests. Now that I'm 75 with Sparty, I'm taking my time there with AP, but my Warlock is the one that's getting a little bit more dedication these days.
Well, and of course, there's all the new announcements on about 7.3.5. There's a lot of spoilers, so when we talked about it, we're going to try to avoid spoilers, I think, aren't we?
Yeah, I really don't want to spoil it for any of our listeners. Definitely when I'm playing the game, there's some things that I will spoil for myself. Other things like the cinematic for Argus, I will not until the actual I kill the actual boss or actually get there. So I don't watch any of the YouTube stuff, MMO Champ, whatever's on Wowhead. It's all when I'm actually seeing it in game. But yeah, 7.3.5 PTR is up there. What they have added, the forms for it, right? They've got level scaling, so players that will be able to level alts based off those ranges, right, that they talked about during BlizzCon. So, Westfall can go the first 20 levels, for instance, something like that.
Well, Tally was testing it. I was watching him, and it did look like there was some scaling. It was interesting. I don't think he got very far. He started with a level 1 druid, and I think lost entrance about level 5. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But again, it gives people that flexibility to level, and it's great that they're finally putting those things in, well ahead of Battle for Azeroth, right? There was something that I saw on one of the patch notes where a lot of the things that they're putting in right now are actually part of Battle for Azeroth, but those main data mining websites, right, MMO Champ, Wowhead, are going to see a lot of things early on, right? So the things that we're seeing on the PTR may not necessarily be attributed to 7.3.5, but instead are attributed to the next expansion. So that's the big difference there. Allied races, things that may not come early, even though they're already in the patch notes, for instance. Or, that
well,
are
the
being
big
data mined.
news is you get 4 whole extra slots if you have authenticators in the backpack. We're going to actually get 4 extra slots. I can't believe that's all we're getting.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing. To be honest, it's, 20 slots, which is, I guess, the very basic level, like a small level bags. It is good, though. It's 4 extra slots. I know some players, Drea is my wife, her bags are always full, and they're a massive mess. So 4 extra slots will definitely help her, but I'm sure she'll fill those 4 really quickly and then still have the same amount of bag space. That being said, authenticators, everyone needs to have them. They're pretty much foolproof. Outside of social engineering, authenticators are really one of the best ways to keep your accounts safe, and there's really no reason to it, right? There's a reason not to do it. The old authenticator system where you'd have to constantly put in the numbers, no such an inconvenience. That's no longer gone. That's no longer there. It's once a month typically, or every time you run a new computer, that's when you're putting on the authenticator. And these authenticators, they're both the keychain ones as well as mobile ones. I've had multiple different phones, and it's not that bad of a pain in the butt to enable a new authenticator on your phone. So I mean, people need to be using them, right, for your own account safety. And my own guild's permissions are set up in such a way where you cannot be a full member and above, so full member, veteran, officer, myself, unless you have an authenticator enabled. And that's really for the security of the guild, security of the guild bank, all that stuff. And it's there to protect you, right? So I don't think there's a good valid argument for not having an authenticator these days.
Oh, I don't either, but I just find it amusing that we only got 4 slots, so I'll quit grumbling about it.
See, if it was like a proper, I don't know, 28 slot backpack, sure, that would be awesome. It'd be even more incentive for players to do it, right? I mean, it's 4 slots. It's, you're going to fill it with a couple potions, whatever, very quickly.
Well, you have to see how I have to navigate things when I'm doing all the crafting, because I bulk craft for Death Jesters,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep everything. There will be some reason I need it sometime in the future. And so I'm always moving things around, trying to have enough slots just to craft feasts, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I could use a few more than 4. Thanks.
Oh, for sure. I mean, every little bit does help. So what else do we
Right.
have? There's a Seething Shores battleground. So what is this?
Well, I don't know that much about it because honestly, I sort of wait until it all comes live. I
Mm.
watch the PTR news, and except when we're actually testing beta, I don't get in and check out all of these things. And I can guarantee you, if it's PvP related, I haven't even looked. So you're going to have to find a PvP expert.
We'll have to talk to our PvP experts. I know we're doing a bunch of RBGs, and that's been pretty fun this week so far. So hopefully that'll continue on. And when the new battlegrounds do come out, we'll be able to play around with them, continue doing RBGs. I think that's one of our big goals as a guild, or a lot of us as a guild here, because RBGs have really been a really good focus this tier. People want to get their titles, or some kind of titles, get their mounts for the 40 wins. And get that stuff done, which is awesome, right? I mean, we haven't done RBGs as a guild in many, many years.
Well, it's awesome to see you guys doing it every week after raid. I know that the Eldor Time Walking's coming out, which I'm
Hmm.
looking forward to. Just saw some information that there's some new achievements, but I'm not sure if that's 7.3.5 or if that's actually coming out in Battle for. I'm going to say Battle for Alliance because that's the way I want to call it. I make my own names up in the game. Just ask Sparty.
And so there's a new selfie camera and filters. Is it still a
Apparently,
thing?
there's going to be a new quest. And again, I don't know. I didn't look that close at it, but there's going to be a new selfie camera with new filters because I know that it's one thing you encourage in Raid is that everybody stop what they're doing and take selfie pictures.
Yeah, I can see it now. There should be an achievement where you're on Kingaroth, those big purple balls are chasing you, and you have to stop and take a selfie, like Indiana Jones style.
I think you should do it on the elevator myself, but what do I know?
Awesome. And so our last little thing here. So with Heroic Argus, for those who don't know, you do get a mount out of it, right? The Violet Spellwing. So what we want to do is something called, we're really trying to find a good name for it. Buddy Bird's Fellowship of the Wing, which is a fun little punny name. We want to, really get the community these mounts as well. Similar to what Friendship Moose was done back in the day, we want to get these Buddy Birds for our players. So that's something we're going to start doing in the Christmas season here with just getting everybody the mount, getting them their heroic Argus kills as well, and getting it done. And then again, extend that to the community. Right? We want to pay it forward. We want to make sure everybody does get their mounts, at some point during this tier, this expansion, because it is a really, really cool mount, right? It does change colors. I don't know. It's awesome. I really like it. I think it's really well done. I think it's better than Friendship Moose, honestly.
I like the mount. I think it's great. And I love the response of our community leaders when we brought up the idea of getting the guildies getting them the mounts, because we're still working through this content ourselves, but we want to make sure we're sharing with the guild. And I was really excited with everybody's response.
Oh, for sure, the reception was great. The Zeros to Heroes team leads, they definitely want to get everybody their mounts, and it's awesome, right? Some players aren't normal or heroic raiders, and we definitely want them to experience these fights and get that mount, right? Because they're part of our group, they're part of our family, and we want to help our friends out.
We had a great picture yesterday when Wobble Gobble went ahead and got heroic down, and we were all sitting in front of Tumas Sargeras with the mounts, and Heppy took a great animated screenshot. I'll have to add it to my Twitter so that you can all see, because we sat with our followers and everything else, and we had all of our pretty mounts. So we had our buddy birds as a team, and we want to spread that through the guild and the community.
I like that. Hashtag buddy birds. All right, birds for our buddies. Awesome.
So we're starting a new trend, and we're going to get that out and pay it forward.
Awesome. So, all right, let's move on to our next little segment here, which is the Leadership Lounge. So with this one, we want to talk a little bit in terms of, what the guilds are doing, some officer advice. So the question was, do guilds jump into normals and then heroics or mythics? And my advice typically has been for players to go into normals first to experience encounters, depending on the tuning too, right? Again, a lot of players don't do PTR testing. The encounters do change from PTR to live. The best thing to do for a majority of guilds, right, is do those normals first, start learning the mechanics, start learning the fights, and then go into heroic as well. We're talking about tuning a little bit. The tuning's been on the easier side for sure, and I think that's the general consensus. But definitely you want to go normals, heroics, and then mythic in that progress. You don't want to jump right into heroics. Even though the tuning is a little bit easier, you probably get a lot more benefit out of, the loot potential just doing normals first as well.
Well, I don't know. There's the other argument on that side, and maybe you can help with that, is since those first few bosses are so easy, why not jump into the mythic right away and get them? And I know there's a lot of considerations, for example, the new Pantheon trinkets, and of course the tier gear and how to get it distributed. And then you have new players or retired players or people who've been on hiatus and come back. I know our group, we had too many. We had more than 30.
Wow.
And so not everybody got to go. And so how do you handle all of those things?
It really depends. So for the average guild, again, I would say go normals, heroics. For a guild like ours, the philosophy is that gear always helps, right? Every little bit does help, whether it's a trinket, whether it's some gear. Part of it is allocating time, and how much time do you have in a given raid week, right? So Death Jesters has 10.5 hours of raiding. So how do we want to split up the 10.5 hours between heroic, mythic? Do we still want to do normals, for instance? Is there enough benefit out of it? We got a fair amount of upgrades from heroic, a bunch of tier gear. We got a bunch of 4 pieces, 2 pieces done, tons of relics. We did get a couple trinkets as well, and it does all help out. Given a 3-hour clear of heroic, that gives you 7.5 hours of mythic left. Is that the way to go? Yes, no, maybe. It depends on the tuning, which is what you said, right? So one of our plans is to go into Tuesday, and depending on how the other mythic guilds do, because we raid 9 o'clock Eastern, so depending on how the other guilds do in terms of how quickly they blow through the first few bosses, we may decide, hey, let's do the first 3 mythic bosses because they're fairly easy anyway, then go switch gears to heroic, and then as the guilds come out with their videos and their logs and everything else, we'll use those to really leverage that time that we have, and then go right back to mythic. So that might be our plan going forward. But again, it's all math, right? You need to do X DPS and Y time to kill the boss. If you have more DPS through that heroic gear, through that normal gear, well, the mythic bosses are that much easier too, right? So it depends on how you want to allocate your time. Again, these are only the first couple bosses, right? Like, it doesn't matter, the sort of first, second, third. What it really comes down to is that final boss and getting to that end point, right? Like, these tiers are not a sprint; they're a marathon for a majority of these guilds, unless you're off in those world first guilds, of course.
I'm sorry, Sparty. I'm Elite Raider, and I want to kill all the mythic bosses now, and I think that's an awful idea. Now what do you do?
Well, do you, do you have those raiders that that say, "Hey, this is probably a bad idea. I want to do mythics first." Well, that's fantastic, right? But it comes down to one person. That's the guild leader, right, or the officers or the raid lead. What the direction of that guild is, right? People can have their own opinions, and that's fine, right? But ultimately, you have that person as a guild leader or an officer to make those decisions. And the one thing that I always say is the success and failure of that guild always lays on the shoulders of the leadership, right? So if you make a bad call and you lose out on a couple of ranks, well, you're gonna have the fallout from your raiders for that, right? If it's gonna be easier, harder, whatever, well, really, it's up to the officers to decide. And yeah, you get your feedback from the players, see what they think. But unless you have some tangible evidence as to how easy or how difficult the tuning is, it's too early, right? And people can have their own opinions up to that point, but you need to wait until the first couple bosses do die by some guilds before you make that decision, I think.
Well, and I know that there's a lot of thought on the tier 21 drops and
Yep.
how to get them distributed as much as possible to the raid. And maybe I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because we've talked about it before, but what's your priority? Especially, I know I am not at all sure that the holy tier is going to be even worth my time.
Hmm.
But supposedly they're going to be nerfing the tier 20 gear, and so it may
Yeah.
look better going forward. And how do you make that determination on the distribution of all of that?
So you always go into these things knowing that some of the tier bonuses will be revamped. Blizzard has a history of nerfing the previous tiers, buffing the future ones. It really does depend. So initially going to the Sims, they're not always super accurate or reflective of these bosses. At this moment, there are some classes, Boomkins for instance, which will use their tier 20 bonuses for as long as they can. The same thing happened with Demon Hunters and Resto Druids for a long time in with the Nighthold tier going into Kil'jaeden, for instance. So it really does depend. We have our own priorities in terms of, yes, this person's bonus is the biggest bonus, but is it really the best choice for the guild, right? So for instance, if we have a Frost Death Knight applicant, right, and their bonuses are by and large the best ones for Vank, well, do we give it to the Frost Death Knight Vank, or do we give it to our rogue who's consistent and going to put out those numbers and it has a lot more loyalty to the guild? There's no black and white answer in terms of gear distribution. It's always a good gray zone, but there's a lot of discussion between our officers and raid leads as to who should get these bonuses. And what we do as a guild is we don't give out these pieces one at a time. We go through all the tier bosses, so we kill them, we hold on to those pieces so that the officers hold on to those tier pieces, and then we decide, okay, so we have 3 pairs of shoulders, 2 pairs of gloves, 1 chest, and a cloak. Well, should we give to everybody 1 piece, or should we focus a couple pieces, or the entire set on that one person, get them their bonus, then we move on to the next person? And that's sort of our philosophy as well. We don't want to distribute things, based off that single upgrade, but based off those bonuses as well. And that's something that guilds can really look into, right? So, for instance, I think we gave our rogue a 4-piece, or we gave our mages a 2-piece bonus. I think we gave our Death Knight the 4-piece bonus first, and then started giving away 2 pieces as well at a time, rather than people just sitting there with 1 piece or 3 pieces, which doesn't make too much sense.
Well, and there's always the age-old question. I'm a healer. I never see gear. Next.
Well, that's right. I mean, what is the philosophy? Well, typically you give your DPS gear first. Typically, right? I don't mean that every time. Typically or generally give gear to your DPS first, because for every second the encounter goes on, there's potential for catastrophe, or potential for failure. By giving your DPS gear, they're able to kill adds more quickly, kill the boss more quickly, and reduce the duration of those fights, which also means that healers will need to heal less, right? The mana expenditure for healers will be much smaller because the duration isn't as long. So generally speaking, the philosophy is give gear to your DPS first, and tanks and healers. And healers, it's we got to do what we can, but we are the ones that have to work really hard without that gear.
All right. Well, I think my team needs to add a few more priests, but that's all I got to say.
All right, so let's move on to our next little topic here, which is keys to a kill. So we actually had a really good question from YouTube, one of our previous Coaches Corners YouTube channels. And why don't you go through the question here, and I'll go through the answers for it.
Well, it's interesting on YouTube because a lot of times you get comments from very old videos, and this was
Yep.
on about jumping from heroic to a mythic raider. And there's a reason we have a playlist for your coach's corner because they're applicable through expansions.
Oh, for
But
sure.
this raider asked a very good question, and I thought we'd try to cover it here. So, Blacklisted said, "I'm trying to make the jump from heroic to mythic for Antorus. I
Hmm.
found a guild, and I am doing normal and heroic with that team this week. So far, we are 10 of 11 heroic and will likely down Argus tomorrow. Anyways, I know I can do mechanics. I've never had an issue with mechanics, really. My issue is being able to maintain high DPS while dealing with a lot of mechanics. In heroic TOS, I typically rank for my eye level, and if I try hard, I can pull my sim or at least close to it.
Okay.
However, in Antorus, I'm not doing so well. My sim started off as 1.4 million, and I was doing 1.2 on a single target fights that do not have a massive amount of moving. I know that doesn't seem that far off, but when compared to everyone else's DPS, I'm feeling left behind. Yes, they have more gear than I, but not by
Mhm.
much. I also know I can't expect to compete with them because they have a bit more gear, experience, and trust of the guild. But the guild is going to take the 20 best players, and I want to be one of those. And it's hard to compete with the gear, etc. I have to comment on that. I think that sentence right there is probably what every raider thinks, which is the guild is going to take the 20 best players, and I
Hmm.
want to be one of those. I don't want to read the rest. Why don't you start with that and then we can jump into the rest?
Yeah, so part of it, this person says, yeah, they did well in TOS, great. I'm gonna sort of take that as they did really well near the end of TOS, and now they're going into heroic Antorus, which has new mechanics, and generally speaking, like, across the board, Antorus is a very movement heavy tier, extremely movement heavy. And go into this question a little bit later. This person plays a marksmanship hunter, which doesn't do too well in terms of movement, right? So they're doing fairly decently. 1.4 million they sim, 1.2 million is what they're doing. That's fine. Again, sims are not super accurate. They're not truly reflective of a lot of the encounters, especially with Antorus and how much movement there is. Um, so, how are they doing? Really, they need to take a look at how much DPS they're doing relative to the rest of the raid, right? Where's that context? Are they the ones focusing on ads? Do they have some of those, those bitch jobs where they have to deal with interrupts and run off to the side here and kite this? It really does depend, right? Depending on how the strats are formulated as well. The best encounter for simming, right, or for the one that's truly accurate of sims is Varimathras. Very minor movement, right, especially on normal, where you're not running out with the necrotic debuff. It's just shift left and right, and DPS to your heart's content. So with this person as well, gear is a bit of an issue. Yeah, but gear is always going to be an issue, right? There's always going to be somebody that does better than you or somebody that has better gear than you. Okay, and you want to be one of those best 20 players. Well, then make it work. And I know that says, I say that really simply, but we have to go through the logs and see what are the other hunters doing compared to you, right? Why is your DPS a little bit lower? Is it you're not having enough casts, right? Is it your gear? What it's going to come down to, and the part of the answer that I talked about earlier is this is a brand new tier. Until you get very familiar with the mechanics and the movement and the muscle memory, your DPS is definitely going to suffer, right? If we had the exact same gear, so this is to all our viewers, if we all had the same gear 3 months from now, and the encounters were tuned exactly the same, but you've been doing the exact same encounter for 3 months, I guarantee your DPS would be much better then than it is right now because these encounters are so fresh and so new, and you're learning where you have to move, where you have to run, and when. So as you get more proficient, more experience with these encounters, your DPS will definitely increase. Do you want to move on to the next one?
So, Blacklisted goes on to say on Heroic Coven and Agrimar, I was feeling pretty squishy. I was trying everything to survive on Agrimar and couldn't. Even used Prides. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, a
Good.
DPS that used Prides. I wasn't stacked as an marksmanship hunter as we are casters, but not only do we have to cast, but we want to cast our aim shots within a 7-second buff. The issue is having to move all the time for mechanics makes that hard. If I was only a caster, which I'm sure somebody's going to love
Only I
that
was a
statement,
caster. If
who
only
didn't
I was a
have to worry
melee.
who didn't have to worry about the buff, it wouldn't be hard. But if I have to move during the buff, I lose a lot of damage. Just only losing the buff, but capping my focus and having to reset up my buff. And I think that's a challenge for everybody. But what do you think?
Yeah, so it comes down to two things, right? Touching on the previous one, would a raid leader, would I as a raid leader prefer a glass cannon, someone that's going to do really high DPS and then die all the time, or someone that's going to do above average DPS and stay alive all the time? Generally speaking, I want that more consistent player, right? I want that person that's going to hit 80th, 90th percentiles and stay alive majority of the time, able to do mechanics. With this one specifically, right, and I actually went through the logs for a lot of these encounters, a lot of hunters are actually switching to Beast Mastery simply because it is so movement heavy, at least for the first week, right? I would say, 70% of the current top parses are BM hunters because there is so much movement. So yeah, if you want to run marksmanship, right, because you love marksmanship, that's fine, but it's going to come at the cost of some DPS, and like this person said, you want to get that aim shot, those attacks in within that 7-second window. It may not be possible with the amount of movement. That being said, as you get more proficient, get more experience with these encounters, you'll know when to get those buffs up and when to get those attacks in. So it'll take some time. Otherwise, you look at playing a different spec, right? The super fun easy spec, Beast Mastery.
The best part of that spec is the pets you can tame, but that's my opinion on that.
Yep.
So where do you go when you want to look and see what people are doing on those encounters? Just a brief, how do I get there? I don't know where to go look in the logs for this.
This is a great idea for a Coach's Corner tonight. We should do this. We should do this exact question for Coach's Corner. So for those of you that don't know, Warcraft logs, if you're using the advanced logging function, it does have a really cool replay function. So it shows you where everybody was, whereas at each time, what they're attacking, all that stuff. So what you can do, let's say you're playing a marksmanship hunter and your numbers are really, really low compared to another marksmanship hunter. Well, you can compare the logs, right? We can go through a log analysis tonight in Coach's Corner and see, hey, this marksmanship hunter is getting this many more casts off, but why? Well, maybe it's a range issue. Maybe they're in the right position. So part of it, again, is experience and knowing where to go and why. A quick little analogy here. I was playing hockey with a brand new player, and this guy plays, Australian rules rugby. This is probably his third game ever. He has no idea about positioning, right? He has no idea where to stand. And sometimes it's getting those people to help you, to know where to position. So I told him, all right, you're playing a winger position. You're either going to be right here by the hash marks. You're going to be out there by the boards. You're going to be right in front of the net. One of those three spots always, no matter what. And that really helped him. So talking to another player that is proficient, a hunter, right? Seeing what they do, getting that advice, go for it, right? There's the Hunter Discord, which, this person said does have a lot of class and theory crafting, but really talking to other players and getting advice from other players, that's one of the best things you can do, right? Seeing what they do, pick their brains and why, right? Not just, hey, stand here, but, well, why do you want to stand here? And understanding, the mechanics behind those things is really integral. So number one, talk to those players. Number two, go through Warcraft logs in the replay function, see where those hunters are standing, right? And everyone's gonna have a different strat, but see what those guys are doing. And the other thing is look at the other hunter streams or hunter videos. There's some really good YouTube hunters out there, and see what they're doing in terms of positioning, because you'll be able to see why and when they're standing in certain places and hitting those high numbers, right? A lot of it is being really efficient with your movements, right? Minimizing the amount of times you have to move and maximizing your DPS, being proactive with your spots. So knowing the next ability is going to land on you or the next ability is going to stand over here, where should you be positioned in 5 seconds, right? It's like playing sports. That puck is going across the boards. Should you go chase the puck, or should you go go to the puck where it's going to end up, right? And again, that takes some time and experience.
Well, but when you're going from heroic to a mythic raider, you may not have done all of the extra work that, for example, your Death Jesters team does in having the second spec ready.
Mm-hmm.
So you say simply switch to a different spec. Okay, well, and I'll use mine because my shadow spec I think is still down at 40 or 50 or something. Yep. So how would I make that change if I'm losing all of the buffs that come from my current spec.
And not to mention legendaries, right? Because you probably have the
Right.
legendaries, not the disc ones.
Correct.
So what do you do at that point? You know, me as a holy paladin, at what point do I stop throwing things into holy and put things into ret or protection? It depends on your role, right? So me in the raid specifically, I'll like 99% of the time be a healer, right? Which means I'm going to dump most of my points, 99% of them, into holy. Whereas a DPS player, right? If you hit that 75th trait and you unlock all your Nether Crucible, you know, traits, relics, then maybe start looking into a different one, because I think the amount of AP that you put in from 1 to 75 is the same as you would put in from 75 to 77. So this hunter, for instance, you know, let's say there are 75 traits, right? They went from 1 to 75. So instead of going 76, 77, maybe take a look at going 1 to 75 in Beast Mastery, right? And then have 2 specs. We have a number of players that, you know, have 2, 3, almost 4 specs at 75, and it really helps, right? That kind of flexibility is really, really great for raid leaders, right? Having, you know, one of our druids, Roshi, he's one of our officers, and he mains healer. He'll boomkin as needed because we have an overflow of healers, and then he'll tank as needed too. And he has, I think, 75 traits in pretty much every one of those specs because he's doing it for the guild, right? Rather than going, you know, a couple extra concordance points, you know, a small extra little, 300, 400 stat buff for concordance when it procs, to having those crucibles unlocked, and that's, you know, and that's a much better thing to do. So again, it depends on your role, right? In Roshi's role, for instance, it's much better for him to go multiple specs. As a DPS, you know, it might be better for you to go multiple specs. You know, mages might want to go Frost, Fire, then they can switch depending on the encounter. For someone like me, you know, or someone like you who is a primary healer, probably stick with healing, right? The alternative would be, well, if disc is really good, maybe Midgettes wants to go look at disc as well. So again, it depends on that guild specific situation.
Well, and I think I want to add another question to this because it's something that you guys are experiencing right now with one of your retired members that came back. They're coming back, they're catching up. And this particular person happens to be a healer. They've only got a couple of legendaries. As we all know, especially for priest, Velens is a huge difference in healing. And so if you're looking at 2 healers side by side healing, and keeping in mind that, you know, logs and top parses are sort of you know, just there's only so much to heal. But the difference between I was running with him on the achievement run we were doing, and Velens and the Sea Star, which he does not have either one, was 20 million of my healing, and that's the only reason he wasn't just slaughtering me, because he's a far better healer. And so how do you catch up when you can't just go out and go to a boss and get Velens, for example? He may not see Velens for another couple of months. How do you work that into a competitive raiding environment?
Well, you look at one of the other Zeros to Heroes teams, Wobble Gobble did, and what they did for a returning player is, you know, they brought him into normals, they brought him into heroics to get some of that gear, and of course he's the one that got Amantuls. But, you know, in our case here, you know, we're seeing the same player, and some of the relics that are dropping are like 45 item level upgrades for this guy, and like they're huge. Having this guy heal, you know, he was doing half the amount of healing going into heroic, and by the time, you know, we got him some gear from normal and heroic Antorus, he's definitely catching up there, right? He's still missing a couple legendaries, which, you know, which sucks, and when legendaries are such a huge part. But what do you do? Well, sometimes you have to go back to other raids, right? And that's what we've done in the past, and other raid teams have done, is go back to, you know, heroic Tomb of Sargeras or mythic Tomb of Sargeras, try to get some sea stars. Again, as our gear gets a lot higher, those encounters are so much easier. So that's something that we can do tonight, for instance, right? We can go through some of our raid world tours and help some of these players out get that gear to help get caught up, either through legendaries or through gear or through relics or whatever it is. But again, it's easy to gear somebody. It just takes a little bit of time, right? You know, go ahead.
The problem that we're running into is everybody is over Tomb of Sargeras. Over it.
I know.
They don't want to go in and, well, we need to go do this boss because they dropped this, and the groans that come from the team. What do you do with that?
Well, I go back to, you know, one of my old favorite Sparty quotes, you know, ask not what your guild can do, but what you can do for your guild. right? So what can you do for your players to help out your team, right? It is a team-based thing, a team-based game. So what if you were in that situation? Would you want somebody to help you out as well? You're an awesome player, come back from retirement. You want your shot back, right? You know, out of retirement to go play hockey again, or, you know, play this game. You would want your friends to help support you and yeah, yes, help gear you up and help get you back on your feet in terms of rating. So why not help out your friends here too? And so that's where you really look at the initiative of your players to help step up and really help out. You know, some of these healers do get geared up.
Well, I do think it's a great topic for Coach's Corner, and maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
what we do tonight is spend some more time on it.
Oh, for sure. I definitely agree.
Well, now we've got our AP to 75.
Yep.
What do I do with that? Okay, I am primarily a healer. You're primarily a healer.
Mm-hmm.
I do not envy DPS with 3 specs. I do not. So I finally made 75. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing another world quest. I'm over it. What do you do then? Should you be continuing to put it in your main spec? What would you suggest? And I think we need to break it up between Tally, who will probably never see a DPS, you rarely see DPS, and somebody like our poor mages that have 3 viable specs.
Yep.
At least 2.
Yeah, so we sort of look at what you're going to be doing soon and what is most likely. So for instance, in Towley's case, he's going to be a tank no matter what. He's not really going to heal for us or ret for us unless we're having like an April Fool's raid. Did I say? Yeah, I said healer DPS. With our mages, for instance, right? Well, if there's, you know, if they're simming or they're going to do better on fire for, you know, these fights, well, they should probably put their AP into fire first and then frost and arcade down the line, you know, once it's a little bit more important, once they have better gear. Again, it comes down to what roles you're playing. So me as a healer, I'll probably go heals. You as a healer, you go heals. Towley will go tank, so that's where we're going to dump most of our points. For instance, I've got a Paladin app, right? He is, I think, 79 points into Holy right now, which is absolutely insane. Him and our Elemental Shaman Natoro are at 79, which is absolutely crazy. They love AP, which is awesome. But perhaps in their roles, right, the flexibility of having a DPS, so let's say the other Holy Paladin app going into a DPS role might be really, really beneficial for the raid because it allows for more flexibility. And if he is proficient in ret, right, it'll mean we have more flexibility in terms of our raid composition, having that extra melee, that extra, you know, extra wisdom, whatever, to help out. So it does depend, right? It depends on what your guild really needs. But the best thing to do is just talk to your raid leads, talk to your officers of where do you want me to put my AP right now? I'm at 75. What should I do? And just a quick tangent on it. You know, we've had guidelines for our guild in terms of hit these AP targets, right? And it's not so much about the AP. Like right now, everyone's 75, and the goal was hit 75 before Mythic Antorus. Easily done. Again, these guys are hitting 79. The whole point of this encouragement to do AP was not for the AP, but to do guild activities and to be online. So one thing that really spurred from this was the players doing RBGs together. And that's been a really fun environment for our guild, for our groups, right? There's 15, you know, 17 players doing RBGs all the time, which is crazy awesome. We have some players, right, like Natoro, he just loves doing World Quest. He hates Mythic Dungeons, totally fine. He's doing AP stuff, but he's also online. And when you're online, you're also in guild chat, and you can contribute that way. You're contributing to the guild by just being online, right? It's the perception of being online that really helps the guild, right? Whether you're quiet, you're a lurker, if you're online doing stuff, well, your guild roster is increased by 1. And I know it seems like a very nominal thing, but that perception of many players being online and not being raid loggers is a really, really important one. So that was sort of my philosophy with the AP going forward.
Well, and I know some guilds, and I think even yourself, have put out there that if you're not at 75, you're not coming in. What happens if you put that kind of deadline down, and then let's say one of your best players doesn't make that goal? What do you do as a leader?
Well, I mean, now we're getting to the nitty-gritties. It depends. So we've had players say, hey, you know, I've got some real-life situations happening here. I can't spend as much time with the game. Totally fine. Don't worry about it. We're not going to kick you out of the guild or, you know, take your spot because you have real-life stuff. Again, we have human beings behind that monitor, behind that screen, right? So if somebody, can't hit 75 before Mythic Antorus because they've had a lot of real life stuff or a lot of work stuff, or they're moving, or they've been on vacation, it's not the end of the world, right? We're not these Nazis that are going to kick people out, right? We're all reasonable people. Again, it
When?
depends. So, yeah, we're pretty reasonable
When are
people.
you reasonable?
Always reasonable. So if he's not one of our best players, right? Same thing. We want to be consistent across the board. That being said, if Joe Schmo is just being really lazy and they are a good player, well, you got to put those policies into effect, right? So if we had that hard deadline of, if you're not 75, you are not going to Mythic Raid, guess what? That person's not going to be in our Mythic Raid. We might throw them in there for Heroic, right? In order to increase the loot potential, or you want a 30% raid for tier. But that person's going to be lowest on priority for loot. That person's going to be, be sitting out because they just didn't want to put in the effort, right? And that's a lot different than, hey, I've got a lot of things going on. I can't keep up with those demands. And that's fine, right? Compared to, I'm just being really lazy. I don't care about AP. I hate it, blah, 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 whatever. So again, it depends. There's no black and white. There's always gray zones.
Well, and how do you communicate to the team? Because here's the thing. A lot of times they'll put down, well, you're not, no Mythic rating if you're not 75. But then you guys talked to Joe, who had some real live issues.
Mm-hmm.
But the other 19 raiders don't see, or the other 29 or however many, they don't see anything other than they're getting special treatment because they're still in raid and they're not at 75. How do you make that? I mean, there's only so many hours of the day. You can't communicate everything. Some things are personal. But how do you show that to your raiders so that they don't think you're just throwing things out and you guys are ignoring them?
Yeah, well, you do and you don't. For instance, I actually had a couple of raiders come up to me and say, hey, we're making these sort of demands on some of these applicants. I just want to make sure we're having the same demands of our own current members because our own current members are falling behind. I'm like, yeah, totally fine. We've already discussed it with some of those players. Sometimes you don't need to know, right? If so-and-so is having personal issues, I'm not going to share with the rest of the guild, hey, we're giving this guy a break because he's had all these issues. No, but if people ask, for sure, we're definitely going to share, hey, they're having some issues here. We're going to cut them some slack. But it's not just officers. We have a large leadership team that is sort of in the loop as to what's happening. So, if you're a brand new member, you may not know, but it's always okay to ask, right? You should be comfortable criticizing or asking questions, right, to your leadership team without the fear of, hey, if I ask a question, they shouldn't kick me out of the guild. And if, for instance, you do ask that question of, hey, why is Midgettes still on the raid team when she's not keeping up with AP? And then Sparta kicks you out of the guild because you question that, that's the wrong guild to be in. 100%. Listen, you're better off somewhere else, but that's a whole different discussion.
Well, no doubt. And you'll never have to worry about Midgettes asking, because if I want to know, I'll ask.
Good.
But now this is my bane. This is the thing that I hate doing all the time. And you have to feel sorry for my raid leaders because they go, Midgettes, did you do your Mythic 10 this week? No. Mm-hmm. And now it's a Mythic 15, and I really don't want to.
Okay, now, so I guess we have to drag you into it, right?
Yeah, they sort of all gang up on me, but I heard there's some new loot options here.
Yes, so this is the week, guys. For those of you that haven't done it yet, this is the week where you, as a raider or as a semi-hardcore player, whatever you do, this is where you want to try to get your 15s done. Not in time, but complete your 15s. So find some guildies, find some friends. Listen, if it takes you an hour to do it, I was in an hour Arcway. One of our players, says, hey, do you want to come to a chill Arcway 17? I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so it took us an hour. Like we were wiping horrendously, and I'm like, okay, it's a relaxed one. We're just gonna tease each other and chirp each other, and that's fine. But we did get our 17 completed at that time. Definitely not quick enough to qualify for MDIs. But you definitely want to do 15s this week because you do get 940 gear out of them. So the 15s themselves will drop 940 gear. And part 2 of it is when you complete a 15, going into next week and every subsequent week, the loot out of your chest will be 960 quality, right? For those of you that want those big purple numbers for your high gear score or for really to help your own selves out, 960 item level pieces baseline. And of course, they can Titan Forge even higher than that. So if you get really lucky, you'll get some really, really high-end gear. I mean, it doesn't have, it's not great affix. I think it's bolstering quaking or bursting quaking. I can't remember what it is. I haven't done mine 15 yet, but I probably will later today. But yeah, I mean, get it done. Find some friends, and if you have to drag people kicking and screaming like midgets into the dungeon, do so. Right? Get your friends.
Well, the problem is the loot that drops for me is always a cloak, and I am not replacing my FM cloak. Period.
Well, there's other loot that's
I
going to
need
drop.
that cloak so I can still be alive at the end of the raid with the rest of you guys that don't make mistakes.
And, you know what? And that's fine, but that's part of the RNG, right? I can probably count on one hand how many useful upgrades I've gotten out of my bounty every week. Probably on one hand over the course of Legion. I'm sure a lot of our viewers, hear the same thing. It's, I'm a paladin, but all this haste versatility gear is dropping for me, and it's a tier piece which I'm never going to replace. That's fine, but at least you're trying, right? At least sometimes you're going to get those upgrades out of it. You definitely shouldn't expect an upgrade every single time out of your chest.
But I'm a unique snowflake. I should get an upgrade every time.
Well, that's nice. You're not going to get one.
So what are your thoughts on Antorus?
So my thoughts on week 1 for Antorus. It is a super fun raid. I know we mentioned at the start. I think universally, it's just people love it. People really, really have fun. And I've had a number of raiders, myself included. I heard from one of our other team leads, Churter, that they're just going into pugs to do the raids. They're already saved to it. But they really like the encounters, and that's awesome. That is a great thing to hear, and really Bliv's devs should pat themselves on the back for having a really fun tier, and not some of the Tomb of Soak Garrus where you were soaking mechanics nonstop. So I mean, the tuning's been fantastic. Yes, a little bit on the easier side so far. The only downside of that is if Mythic is tuned like Heroic was tuned or Normal was tuned, and we go through a clear super, super quickly, what's going to happen is by January, February, when guilds have cleared this, we're going to have a pretty huge content drought again, right? People are going to be doing Argus for however many months and just re-clearing it, which is, part of it is okay to give people a break, but part of it is, well, we didn't tune this correctly. So that's definitely on Blizz. It's definitely easier to tune things to make them easier than they never tune things to make them more difficult now, right? So once the difficulty setting is in, they're not going to make the heroic encounters any more difficult. So it remains to be seen what happens next week with tuning. We should really keep a careful eye on that one.
Well, I think that we need the Benny Hill music with ENR.
Oh my god.
Because everybody is running around like the Keystone Cops. Just saying.
Yeah, and it's a fun encounter. Like, it's different. It's tower defense. You're running around. It's the new Hellfire Assault. It's a little bit different. Yes, it's on the easier side, but, it's a fun encounter. It's something different, right? Flying around to those different platforms, trying to keep ENR safe. It's, I don't know. I like it. I think, generally, people really love that encounter, despite all the running around.
I don't know. I'm still trying to find everybody most of the time. So which one's your favorite boss?
My favorite boss? I don't know. I always struggle with my favorite bosses here. I like the really simple ones. I like, the Garbage or World Breaker first boss. I like Vermathras, the really simple ones. I like Iminar for all the dodging and the movement and, dodging mines because I'm great at that. I really loved Kingaroth. We're actually doing an achievement raid this week, and one of the achievements is have 9 balls rolling around, so you actually can't get hit by any of the balls while you kill the boss, which was pretty hilarious because everyone's dodging. There's actually a couple safe spots on that fight, for those of you who don't know, where you will never, ever, ever get hit by a ball. It's actually on one of the inside rings, which is really cool. Maybe I'll show you guys sometime. So it's really cool to have all these balls rolling around really quick because they do speed up, and I don't know, it was a fun raid overall.
Overall, I think that all of your favorite bosses involve balls. Care to expand on that?
There's always some kind of balls, and whether it's Leishen and you're soaking balls or catching balls, or there's balls hitting your face, I think it's a Blizzard issue, not a me issue.
I don't know, because you always seem to like those. I'm just saying.
Whatever.
Which one do you... Whatever. Which one do you think is going to be the hardest for Mythic?
Hardest for Mythic, again, it remains to be seen. My inclination, it'll be some of the later bosses. Coven will see some difficulties, Agrimar and Argus. I think the first 3 will have relatively easy tuning. I would expect to kill the first 3 bosses probably this week, and we'll see how it goes. Similar to Hellfire Citadel and how the tuning was back then. We had some rough tuning issues with Tomb of Soak Garrus. I think this will be closer to Hellfire Citadel tuning, where it won't be as bad, but there might be some, easy throwaway encounters, ENR being one of them, depending on your DPS. So I'm not sure. I can't really say which one will be most difficult so far.
It'll be curious to see which one is the one that guilds start backing up behind. And of course, we'll be watching the world race and seeing what everybody's doing. What are you guys doing in preparation for next week?
So again, a little bit what we mentioned earlier in the podcast is we're going to see what guilds are doing for the first few bosses. So again, we raid at 9 o'clock. There's been like 9 hours, 10 hours since guilds get into Mythic. We'll see how quickly they blast through the encounters, whether it's the Oceanic guilds or the early US guilds, and see how quickly they go through things before we make our decision. We may do the first 3 Mythic bosses. We may go into Heroic first to get that extra gear, and then go into Wednesday with Mythic with a fresh start, and have all the videos ready to go. We do have our strats, so we're doing a bit of a strat meeting just to get everybody on the same page for the first few Mythic bosses. That's on Monday, question and answer kind of stuff, just to make sure everybody is crystal clear on what they're doing. And it's something that has been really helpful, with Heroic, right? We had a lot of strat meetings and strat spreadsheets just to make sure people are understanding everything and we're not having issues down the line of, oh, I didn't know this boss had this mechanic. But everybody really comprehends and understands them. And we're just updating our strats now. So as we've made changes to, for an encounter like Kingaroth, for instance, we initially had one group staying in the back, but that was problematic because of the Ruiner. So we split up into 2 groups, one on the right side, one on the left side, which were closer to their actual constructs. And we're just making adjustments to our spreadsheets and cooldown lists going forward. So just getting ready, little prep things. People are going through their videos and get going for Mythic.
Well, I think goals are important. What goals do you have for Death Jesters for this tier?
This tier, I mean, again, as we get older, we're easing down. We're not a 7, 6, 5, 4 rating or days rating guild anymore. We raid 3 days a week now, and we generally want to keep around that US 50 rank. I think last year was a little bit disappointing in terms of class comps and the raid tier. This one, I think there's a much better vibe and a much more positive attitude going into the tier. Obviously we want to hit around US 50. We'll see what happens, but I mean, really, as long as we're having fun with these encounters, that's really what matters, right? We're having a lot more fun as a guild. People are really liking it, and that's great. That's important to me.
No. Raiding is serious business.
Super serious
fun.
business.
You're the fun police. There should be no fun. Anyway, what are we going to do next week?
So next week, we're going to talk about Mythic Antorus. So we're going to do our final sort of Antorus thing before we beat it to death. It is Christmas season upon us, so for those of you that are just catching up on our podcast or our stream, we're doing a Buddy Birds, #BuddyBirds, which is getting people their Heroic Violet Spellwing mount. We're going to get that through our Zeros to Heroes and our DJ groups first, and then we're going to really extend it to the community and want everyone to pay it forward. It is a really cool mount. We're going to talk about giving back to the guild, whether it's, achievement raids or Secret Santas, which we're doing again, or Christmas cards. Last night, I was licking about 3 hours worth of envelopes until somebody told me you start using a sponge, and I was done at that point. So I'm sending out a lot of Christmas cards and Christmas presents for my guildies, which, is fun. It's something I want to do, and it goes back to there's a person behind that screen. It's not just a paladin, a priest, a Towley. It's, there's a person, and you really care about those guildies. So that's how we keep our guild strong and keep together.
I would just like to mention that every year we remind you about the sponge and you forget. So I have zero sympathy for your envelope licking woes.
Yeah, I'm glad those envelopes weren't toxic, or I'd be ending up like George Costanza's fiance at this point.
All right. Well, I think it's been a great podcast, and I look forward to seeing maybe some continuation on the question tonight on Coach's Corner.
Sounds good. Well, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week. So from myself and Midgettes, thank you for watching. Have a good night. And as always, live your life heroically. Have a good one.